Good evening and welcome, everyone, to tonight's May Borough Council meeting. As we have during the duration of the pandemic, we are conducting this monthly Borough Council meeting via the Zoom webinar platform to ensure the health, safety, and of the public safety in our council. We're glad you've joined us here virtually tonight for this meeting. Public participants attending tonight's meeting may provide public comment during the public participation portion and the public hearing portions of tonight's meeting. During these portions of the agenda, please raise your hand virtually and a member of our staff will unmute you and announce you, and you'll be able to ask your question or make your comment. We will have two public comment periods, one towards the beginning and one towards the end. We do ask that you state your name, address, and we do ask you to limit public comment to 3 minutes or less. Thank you again for joining us tonight. We will now begin with the moment of silence and Pledge of Allegiance. Okay. Go. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic
for which it stands,
one nation,
under God,
indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all. All right, we will now roll on to roll call with the Borough Manager.
Ms. Berkeley.
Present.
Mr. Dalton.
Here.
Ms. Dugan.
Here.
Mr. Kirkner.
Here.
Mr. Moore. That's all right. There he is. Mr. Soto. Mr. Weiss.
Present.
Mr. Ewald.
Present.
Mayor Urschler.
Here.
Manager's here, assistants here, lieutenant in place of the chief is here, and the solicitors here. You have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Crack. And Mr. Soto is unable to join us tonight. He did reach out earlier. Under approval for regular meeting minutes, we just want to announce that Borough Council did meet and hold an executive session on April 26th, 2021 to discuss matters of personnel, real estate, and litigation. With that, what is Council's pleasure for our regular meeting minutes for our April Borough Council meeting?
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Motion by Ms. Berkeley, seconded by Mr. Weiss. Any questions, amendments, or changes to the minutes or the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. We do not have any presentations on tonight's agenda, so we will now open our first round of public participation. Any members of the public wishing to take part, please raise your hand and a member of our staff will call on you and unmute you so you will be able to make public comment.
Mr. Lutzker, I've turned on your mic.
Thank you. Dave Lutzker here, 243 Morgan Street in the Borough. I wanted to request, and I know it's on the agenda, to talk about opening the Borough up for public events sometime in the late summer. I appreciate the caution that has been taken by the council up until now, but with the need to plan and the requirement being 90 days, I don't know if that can be adjusted, but with the need to plan to, I think it would be reasonable to expect that sometime in the late summer, we would be able to have outdoor events, more and more evidence showing that the outdoors are pretty safe, that I hope that will open up soon. In the name of the Green Team, we are looking at September 18th. Of course, if that's not going to be possible, we will move it virtually, but we'd like to know if we can plan it for an in-person public event. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Lutzker.
Any other members of the public, if you'd like to raise your hand digitally, a member of our staff will be able to. Oh,
Ms.
there's one.
Cohen, I've turned on your microphone. Barbara, if you unmute yourself, you can address council.
Am I unmuted at this time? Okay, thank you.
Yes.
I'm here to share with you a very special exhibit that the Schuylkill River Heritage Center has now on view for everyone to enjoy. I photographed many churches in B'nai Jacob Synagogue, and we now have a display of Phoenixville's legacy. Its inclusive legacy, that it didn't matter where you came from, what color you were, or what your cultural context was. Everyone was welcome in Phoenixville. A special part of the exhibit is a 48 by 48 portrait, 48 inches, I should say, and it will be donated to the Bethel Baptist Church. The portrait is of a lady named Debbie Mitchell, an African-American lady who was on the board of directors of Phoenixville Hospital back in 1972. George Wallace was still governor of Alabama back then. Phoenixville is so special. Debbie got us young doctors' wives involved in the community, and she was a treasure. She passed away way too young of cancer. She is featured on the Phoenixville mural, and I had found this 48 by 48 inch size sample swatch from 2018. Alan, my husband, and I had it framed, and we donated it to the Heritage Center. And it is now on view with all of the churches and B'nai Jacob Synagogue at the Heritage Center, because Bethel Baptist Church is closed at this time. And we are having a special event this coming Thursday evening. We invite the public to participate. Just go to our website, www.phoenixvillefoundry.org, and you can link in to the introduction to this exhibit. And Pastor Coleman, as well as Pastor Wood, who is the assistant pastor, were at the church. This entire presentation has been videoed and will present it on Thursday evening, May 13th at 7:30, and we invite everyone to participate. If they can't, please come in person. We invite all of you to come when we are open on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday from 11 to 3. It is truly extraordinary to me, with the troubled times in which we're living, that Phoenixville has always been so welcoming. Finally, I'd like to say that we received funding to redo all 3 of our interactive exhibits. The one at the Schuylkill River and its legacy has been finished. The Schuylkill River Trail has been finished. We're working on completing the Chester County one. I applied for funding, and we received funding from Chester County and the Houston Foundation to create a Path to Freedom trail. And so, adding to all the resources in Chester County, we will show how slaves escaped to freedom, along with not only the words, but also the pictures. And this should be up and running. We hope to launch this as part of Phoenixville's Juneteenth celebration. But we're hoping for that Saturday, June 10th, that we will launch the Path to Freedom Trail. And it's extraordinary. I'll give you one anecdote in that there was the Lewis Farmstead in West Vincent, large property, they had iron ore on that property. When slaves would escape and come that way from Lionville, they not only protected them and guarded them, but they worked with David Reeves from the iron company, and they mined the ore for use by the Phoenix Iron Company. And then the slaves didn't go on to Canada. They settled in Phoenixville. The Grimes Church was established in 1857 as a result of former slaves getting work and settling in Phoenixville. So our legacy goes back a long way. I hope all of you will visit the Heritage Center and perhaps tune in on Thursday evening. It will show you the exhibit. And Jean, I think I sent you an image of the exhibit. It was attached to a message that I sent earlier, but if you want to share that with people, that would be wonderful. And finally, we hope to work with the Borough Council, the Planning Commission, and the HARB to settle on the place where Mike Kajak is donating space for the historic Phoenix Wheel that we own. We know how it's going to go together, and it is a treasure. And we know from Brian Van Sweden from the Pennsylvania Museum and Historic Commission that it is the oldest one in the world. And as a sculptor, we should be able to get funding for this historic artifact. Thank you for letting me share this information with you. Does anyone have any questions? Okay. Thank you again for giving me the opportunity to share this historic information.
Thank you, Ms. Cohen. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Okay, any other members of the public tonight that would like to make any comment during this round, our first round of public participation? Give it another moment and then. Oh.
Mr. Ewald, I have no other hands raised at this point.
Okay. So with that, we'll close this round of public participation and move on. There is another round later in the agenda. So with that, we'll move on to communications and council participation. Any updates or communications from any members of council tonight? Okay, moving right along. We will transition into the mayor's report. Mayor Urschler. You're on mute.
There we
There
go.
you go.
I am not driving. I am parked. So thank you all so much. Thank you so much, Mr. President, and everyone. Thank you especially for joining us from home, joining us virtually and joining us remotely. It's such a neat way for us to continue to be connected. Just a couple of things to update you on. We have had a pretty exciting couple of weeks. Our high school juniors and seniors were able to have a modified prom. It was actually outdoors, followed by an incredible event called Focus, which is an after prom party, which again was held outside, held on the Washington field up at the Phoenixville Area School District. So that was great for all of our students. So a big congratulations to our juniors and our seniors. Our St. Mary's Church on the north side actually hosted their first their first bingo that they've been able to do in a number of months. And so this is really the return of bingo. It was absolutely beautifully done. Everything was done in conjunction with the CDC protocols. They had lots of spaces and separate tables for individuals to be seated at. Everybody had their masks on. And so it was a great way for everyone to start to return to some sense of normalcy and have an opportunity to play bingo again. So thank you to our friends at St. Mary's. Thanks for letting me call bingo. And thank you to everyone who came out to support them. Last week, we had 100,000 meals. It was our celebration of 100,000 meals served through the Phoenixville Area Senior Center in response to COVID-19. And so we had a number of dignitaries who were there. It was kind of like winning the Publishers Clearinghouse. The car drove through, suddenly there were balloons everywhere, lots of special gifts and prizes, and a very special congratulations to Maureen Sullivan, who is one of our dear friends at the Senior Center. She was actually the 100,000th. She received the 100,000th meal. So congratulations to Maureen. A special shout out, of course, to Mother's Day to all of the people in our community who are mothers, who play some kind of mothering role in our community, or maybe you are the mother of a fur baby, and that is incredible too. So thank you so much for being part of our community, and thank you for all of the great work that mothers out there do. Our friends at Crescendo had their end of year celebration, and they let me go and visit them. Crescendo is an incredible organization that's based out of Barkley Elementary School, and it's to help students of all students to actually learn an appreciation for violin and music. And so I got to go and visit them for their end of year celebration, and they actually have learned some incredible Beatles songs on the violin. So, and they're incredibly talented. And thank you very much to our dear friends at Crescendo. Also, a big thank you to our friends at Acme, who turned 130 this year. The Acme supermarkets, and of course, we have one located in Phoenixville. It is their 130th anniversary. And in celebration of that, they actually made some major donations to Ann's Heart, PAX, and the Senior Center. So thank you so much to Acme for your incredible work in our community. Thank you to everyone, perhaps the shoppers, people who work at our Acme. Thank you very much for all you do in our community, and thank you for your generosity to Ann's Heart, PAX, and the Senior Center. Another exciting event that we did have and we were able to hold in person, it was beautiful and outside, that was Arbor Day. And we saw about 50 people come together for Arbor Day, which was put on in conjunction with our tree commission. So thank you to our members of our tree commission. And they came out and actually helped to plant over 25 new borough trees. So those were planted in Reeves Park and all throughout the borough in different locations. But just another beautiful way that people were able to come out and socially distance from one another and still participate in Arbor Day celebrations. Coming up this next month, just two things to mention. We have the Kiwanis Patriotic Celebration. That's going to be on May 29th. This has been going on for a number of years. You can go to the In This Together PXB website to see this virtual presentation. Usually it's done in person, but we will still have it virtual this year. And of course, that same weekend is Memorial Day. So just want to take that opportunity to remember all of the people in our community who have served in our armed services and who have paid the ultimate sacrifice to ensure our freedoms. And then finally, on June 4th, we will have a number of Rise Up celebrations for all of our fifth graders. So a big shout out and congratulations to all of our fifth graders and parents of fifth graders here within the borough and in Schuylkill and East Pikeland. We are very proud of you, and we can't wait to see all of your Rise Up celebrations. So thank you very much. Thank you again for all being here tonight. And that's all we have, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. With that, we'll move on to the rest of our agenda. Coming up first, we have appointments and public resolutions. Each month, we have a handful of openings on our various boards and committees that we like to try to get filled. I know currently we have a couple openings on our zoning hearing board, civil service, and beautification advisory committee. Any members of the public who are looking to help take part and volunteer some hours towards some of the borough initiatives, we urge you to reach out to your council person or borough staff, and we can guide you through the easy process of coming on board. With that, through our police personnel and public safety committee, we do have a pair of recommendations for recreation board tonight. So what is council's pleasure?
Mr. President, I would like to make a motion that we appoint Allison Pevel to the Recreation Board for the vacant position, term expiring April 30th, 2022.
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Berkeley, second by Ms. Dugan. Questions on the motion? I would just like to say this is welcoming her back to the rec board, and we appreciate her coming back. And with that, no other questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 6-0 with Mr. Dalton out of the room at the moment. And we have one other appointment. What is council's pleasure tonight? Ms. Dugan?
Okay, I'll make a motion to reappoint Ed Lancy to the rec board for a new term expiring April 30th of 2025.
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Dugan, second by Mr. Moore. Again, this is a reappointment. We appreciate all the years that Ed has already put in, and welcome him for the reappointment and from my point of view. So with that, all those in favor,
Aye.
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 opposed, motion carries 7-0. So that's 2 less openings on our boards and committees. So thank you for stepping up, Ed and Allison. With that, we'll move on to new business tonight. We have 2 items, one for discussion, the first item for discussion is regarding the CDC and governor's amendments to the COVID restrictions. A couple new items came down today, so I know it's been new information on a daily basis. But Mr. Crack, if you wanted to lead us off with some insight as to what staff has been reviewing.
A state of confusion is what we've been reviewing. No, actually, we've been monitoring this very well. We've making some internal decisions for things that we think are appropriate at this point in time. So I'll put them out there. Prior to today, which the announcement from Philadelphia added to the number of things to review, but we have been looking at the opening of the Borough Hall for back to the public beginning June 1st. We think we can do this safely. We think we can create an environment where people can come into the lobby one at a time, or 2 persons if it's a family. PPEs on table prior to getting to the front desks, and then being able to work through that. We've also toyed with the idea of maybe limiting it to appointments, and so we're kind of vacillating back and forth. I think leaning towards just opening it up, and maybe a Monday, Wednesday, Friday routine where we allow the public to come in during the day and deal with that. Then the second part of that of the 3-legged stool is what do we do about us as far as council, planning commission, and committees. And we've toyed with the idea of originally of trying to figure out ways to put up plexiglass and what have you. But after the CDC regulations, after the governor's revisions, and now Philadelphia, if you read further into the article that came out today, there is no density restriction once they open up on June 11th, but masks are required. So it seems like from a comfort level, as long as we do all of these things and we mask up, we should be able to open up. So we've toyed with the idea of Borough Council meeting in June and Planning Commission meeting in June to sort of test the waters, because they're the bigger venues. Leave the committees until July to make sure that we're able to monitor what's going on. So that's sort of the direction we're looking at. And then the third leg of that stool is our downtown. And I think it falls back into it is what it is out there, and masking up is still the thing to do. And primarily it's the honor system. So those are what we've talked about. But what I don't know from you is your level of comfort, whether it be council meeting or planning commission or committee meetings. Is June too soon for you? Are you okay with that? And we'll try to make it work. We still got some things we got to hammer out as to whether it's a hybrid or not. We can certainly make the room have a target maximum, and when we hit that maximum, it is what it is. And we can try to exercise more options with AVT and try to keep the videos going. So those are the things that are on the table. Primarily, though, we can do just about anything. We don't know is your comfort level. And so we ourselves, from a staff perspective, this week we brought the first person of the team back into the group. Next week we bring one more. And then the remainder will be in by July timeframe. I think there's 6 folks that are not in the A or B team. The A and B teams are the teams we switch back and forth. Our goal is to get everybody into either A or B, work through that, and then probably from everything that I'm seeing on the business side of things, the large companies and what have you, it seems like September was the time frame. But that may change based on what Philadelphia just did today, which is saying that offices are okay with density, just mask up. So those are the variables. What we need is your input. So I'll stop and try to answer your questions. And we've got Dina here, we got Kelly here, we got everybody that can help answer how they feel about certain things as well.
Okay. Thank you, Gene. Ms. Dugan.
I just have a comment in the sense of like, if we're going to do a council meeting, I think the committee meetings would be much easier to do because less people go to those. So if we're going to do the council meeting, we ought to do the committee meetings too, or we do the committee meetings first and then do council after that. But if we're going to like let the floodgates go, then why would we wait on the committee meetings? I don't understand that.
I think it was more along the lines of the audiovisual side of things, to try and hammer out the details on a full scale with planning commission and council, because we got everybody there at the dais. With committees, we always met in the back. Well, we would have to now move the committees up to the tables to try and accommodate folks. It's sort of, there's no dog in the hunt. We're not trying to pick or choose. We're just tossing ideas out to try and get your measure of how you feel about it. From my position, I feel very comfortable that we could start in June with all of it, but that might be too much. There might be too many meetings for people to try to attend in the first month. And so maybe breaking them up helps that matter as well. Again, it kind of falls back as, how do you guys feel about it?
And I know staff had been, well, Kelly, you probably have some things to, I saw your hand raised.
Yeah, it was more of just the audio visual things. Gene and I talked about it a little bit this afternoon after Philadelphia announced their plan a little bit. And we've talked to many other municipality managers that Gene and I sit on a consortium with on kind of how they're doing things as well. We need to make sure that equipment is, ready to go. We have, if we're going to look at a hybrid situation where, though we're in person, do we still want to allow the public be there via Zoom? So like, that's something that if we're going to want to do that, we have to prepare from an equipment perspective. And the reasoning, I think, that we talked about planning commission and council was because of AVT is already with us for council, so they can help us facilitate that and try that out before we go with all of our committees. If we want every committee to be via Zoom, because every single one except rec board, a couple of times have been outside, has been via Zoom. So I think switching that off and getting people ready to go inside may not, you might miss a demographic. And I think we were just trying to prepare for both, if that's the direction you guys want to go in.
What is council's thoughts? This is going to be affecting our upcoming set of meetings.
I think, given that I feel like we will take all appropriate measures to be safe, I'm open to and personally feel comfortable with doing meetings in person, having these accommodations, but I understand that there's the tech piece that we need to consider. And I also understand that there's members of the public that may not feel comfortable coming in person. We're going to have to look at capping numbers so we can distance. So we do need to provide that Zoom option so that folks can still participate. I'm open to trying it all, but I understand too, if we need to kind of work out the kinks with a few meetings, maybe that is better, because I wouldn't want anyone who doesn't feel comfortable or hasn't been vaccinated or whatever it might be in the public that wants to participate to not have access to that. So I get that piece of it. But I feel comfortable, and I feel comfortable that we would take the appropriate measures to meet in person and meet appropriately, and do everything we need to do.
Ms. Dugan, you're on mute. Dana, you're on mute. Dana, you were muted during that.
Dana, you were muted. I'm sure it was great.
You're still muted.
Still. Dana, you're still on mute.
I cannot get this right, can I?
There we go. Now you're
All
here.
right. I'm
Let's start
going to
again.
say again, I agree with Ms. Barkley. I am ready to go back to in-person next month, especially since, like, in my position, my finance meeting is, nobody ever goes to that anyway. So I have no problem with that being in person. And like you had mentioned that rec board, we've been meeting in person outside since it started getting warm again. And we did it all the way up until, I guess, October of last year. So I'm prepared for it, and so I guess that depends on everybody else now.
With Mr. Moore, go ahead.
I mean, I'll offer that I'm prepared either this month, or if we want to just roll it up for June as kind of a starting point, to attend both committee and council meetings and planning commission meetings in person. I do agree that a number of these committees, I think we should shoot for all of them, or a subset perhaps of the ones that typically have people attending and have agenda items that have people attending. And in that case, we should try to figure out a way to use the dais so that we can allow people who don't want to come but do want to attend to do virtual attending, and virtual attending not only for council meetings but committee meetings. So I'm thinking that that should be the framework. And if that's kind of the framework in terms of bringing up committee meetings and planning commission meetings, then we should maybe pick a subset, rec board, finance, public safety, planning commission, something like that. And along with the borough council, see how it all works out and find out what the kinks are.
Kelly, Kelly, what have we found out in terms of being able to do Zoom and have the microphones and everything work properly in council chambers, so that we could do a hybrid where the committee is, or the borough council is in person, but the public is all remote?
So I talked with Steve and Ian and Mike from Phoenix Media Group last week. We talked to them. There's a couple pieces of equipment that we would need in order for it to work. It's a TriCaster for it to allow for multiple things. So not only would the microphones have to work, but you would also have to hear what the person is asking if they are doing public participation via their piece without having feedback. So they're getting that information together for us. And hopefully we'll have that by early next week. And they're also coming in to test all of our equipment as well next week to make sure things are running smoothly, because we really haven't turned it on in a little bit of time. So we have them coming in and checking all of that. There is a feature on Zoom that has a phone piece to it, but there's another way that I think that we can do it through a TriCaster that they talked about. So when it comes to council, I think that would absolutely work, especially because we have it budgeted for them to be there. For committee meetings, we don't have that budgeted for them to be there. So we would have to find another alternative for committee meetings to do so. I think that in June, if we did council and planning commission, our budget would be fine to support both of those. If we did both of those meetings with AVT or Phoenix Media Group support. But I don't think I think it would be a large cost to do all of them via our committee meetings. So I think that we're working through it as best we can as quickly as we can. I don't think we're the only municipality talking to them to get the ball rolling in this capacity. So we're working with them as quickly as possible to see what our best options are for near future, or for the now, and then for future if we're going to stick with this plan.
So I'm not hearing any objections from council to this idea. It sounds like we'll probably need, possibly some staff feedback as we get closer. Mr. Kirkner, go ahead, please.
Yes, may I ask that we just, I'm reluctant for personal reasons. I'm not saying that we shouldn't do this. I'm just saying that for my own personal reasons for the next couple of months, I'm reluctant to do any type of in-person meetings, and I wanted to ask if there's a way to accommodate specifically for the June council meeting, some kind of remote connection for that. I'm not saying this is a bad idea. I'm not saying it's the wrong thing to do. I'm just saying for my own situation here, I'm not quite comfortable going into live meetings of any type. I'm not going into offices or anything. So,
prior to the pandemic, we allowed the virtual attendance from council. It could not constitute quorum, but short of that, I can't imagine we couldn't find a way to have you Zoom in or teleconference in, just like we would have prior to the pandemic. Kelly.
Yeah, I was just going to say it would work very similar to what's here. So we have a webinar, and we are all panelists on this webinar, and then there's public. So what we would do is we would still have people in person. You could still do it virtual, but you would be as a panelist, not as a public member. So you would be able to interact with that, and that's where that piece of equipment I think would be really helpful, is that you would be able to hear everyone via the microphone, and they would be able to hear you as a panelist, muted and then unmuted, and that kind of, like, you could still be able to do that yourself, not from the public. So I think that we could absolutely accommodate that once we get the other technology pieces figured out. But I think that would be the easier thing to do.
okay, thank you.
It does seem like the June timeline is the best bet in terms of lining up with various CDC guidelines and state and other rules. So I think if staff can continue to work with, at least from what I'm hearing, if staff can continue to work with our audiovisual consultants to, I think thankfully we budgeted to do some upgrades, which have not yet occurred. So there is a little bit of money allocated to doing some improvements. But it sounds like we have a pretty cohesive plan here. Any other comments from council, or shall we move on? Gene, does that cover enough marching orders for staff?
I think it does. Obviously, we've talked about some ways to do that. We know from experience that if we all went into the room with our laptops, we get tons of feedback. So I think our goal is that, as you're looking at this screen right now, let's say the middle screen, well, the middle screen would be a shot of all of Borough Council. So we, as a group who's in that room, would be in that one block, but you'd still be able to hear us all because the microphone will be tied to the speaker system above. So those are the things we're going to try to work out. So those that are in live would be one frame instead of 8 or 9 or 10 frames. It would be one frame to make it a lot easier to bring in Rich or anybody else that decides that they're not quite ready for whatever reasons to to participate, but they would be their own square from afar.
And Chuck, is there anything from your end that we need to consider on this?
Absolutely not, John. Right now, the rules, as long as Act 15 is still in effect, which it is, everything's very liberal as far as participation. And to your point, if any counselors feel that they don't want to participate live, we don't even need a physical quorum at the live meeting under Act 15. So literally, counselors can participate in person or remotely presently, and as long as Act 15 is in place. So everybody can kind of pick and choose what they feel most comfortable doing, and it's all perfectly legal.
Any other questions from council or direction or comments? Mr. Moore.
Yeah, so this is about meetings, and you already informed us about attendance or business operations opening Borough Hall. I think, Gene, you also mentioned discussion, what we're going to do in terms of downtown was also part of this topic. And I think what you said, basically mask up and the honor system. I mean, is there anything about our current state of emergency that would need to be altered at this point, given that it's mid-May and our next meeting isn't until mid-June?
I think probably the only thing that's hanging out there that's somewhat we're in a somewhat untenable situation because we did something, and that is we enacted an ordinance of temporary face masks as a requirement. I don't know how that flies in the face of what's coming down from the CDC, the governor, and other things. I don't know that we need to do any action at the moment to terminate that ordinance, because it does allow for that. But I think that we have to look at it from the practical side of things, and that is encourage. And I think that's the right word. Just keep encouraging people to mask up in the politest of ways, and not have a dominating factor overriding that, but just everybody work together. We work with the folks in the downtown through the permitting process, and just encourage everybody to keep masks on. And I think as long as we do that, we're probably as well put as any other municipality, and then some.
Okay.
But we will have to look at the ordinance at some point in time, because it is, I mean, it's technically, it's a legislative action that we either have to take out or deal with it. So Chuck, I don't know, the liberalness of the masking. I mean, everybody said you should wear the mask. You should. Before, there was more of a requirement, which is the genesis of why we did the ordinance. Now we're kind of falling into a gray area, a heavy-handed ordinance, but a you should version of the CDC and the governor.
Yeah, ultimately going to be for council to decide when you're ready to take action and repeal that ordinance. Certainly you have the ability to be more restrictive than the CDC guidelines, but that's a policy decision.
Right. So maybe that's something that we send down to policy for discussion this month.
Good idea.
The other component that almost breezed right past is council and staff's thoughts on temporary community events.
Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, I was just going to mention that, Mr. Ewald.
Go ahead.
So again, I've been reading things, I've been thinking about it. I don't know what other people's views are. I don't know what staff is feeling. Outside things, I think everybody feels, in a general sense, I get that people feel more comfortable with. So I guess that's a discussion. I know we had set that we weren't going to look at anything until July, knowing that July, August, September, things could look much better and much more promising. Do we want to take into consideration the 90 days and maybe hold, if we hold to our July date, do we be a little bit flexible in planning for things in the fall if we feel like, and things are still moving in the direction that September is going to be a safer time? I know there's still a lot of unknowns and question marks. I just want to be reasonable and have the conversations, and obviously if things were to take a turn in the other direction, we would need to reevaluate and do what's responsible. So again, it's all food for thought, and I'm interested in what other folks are thinking.
Okay, Kel.
I just wanted to bring up a subject while thinking about this. With our downtown closure, I think any event that wants to be held downtown, I think that we stick with the roads that are closed are the roads that are closed. I don't think any additional roads should be closed at this point. I think that there's plenty of room in the Main and Birch Street parking lot to have those types of events. They're the things that we've talked about internally a little bit, just to kind of say, if we're keeping with the road closure and the open air permit setup, I think that there's space enough to accommodate those events. I know that I've had some conversations with internally with Jessica and Phoenixville First about kind of what we can do and those things. I mean, I know that our entertainers are ready and willing. I think that we have businesses that are ready and willing. And I think a lot of these events, it's going to be the hardship of trying to find sponsorship. That's just, we can open it up, but really, I don't know how many are truly going to be doing something, only because everyone has felt on hard times, and sponsorship is really the biggest, piece to help people have those. But just that piece was really the setup that we have. We would just need direction if you're willing to have other roads closed, or when we get applications in and we talk through it via staff, we say, hey, hold on, configure this in this area. No more road closures at this point. It just, and they're just kind of pieces that we would like to talk through. They're just my 2 cents on that perspective.
And to answer the other part of the question is, the 90 days is just enough to get us through our process, meaning we got to get an application in, we got to get it through the committee, then we have to get it over to council, and then we have to get lined up to do that. With that, I would simply say that anything less than 90 days has done nothing for us over the past years but create problems. So it's the reason we put the 90-day rule in there. That needs to be stayed hard and fast. The July 1 start date, I think it's a very comfortable place to be because, I agree with Kevin. First of all, a lot of the folks that would do events have already made the decision not to do them in certain times because of the lack of sponsorship and the lack of that, notwithstanding our own road closures and what have you. I think the July 1st date is still a good date. I don't see any reason to not start on July 1, but July 1 and the 90 days, most people have accepted that and are dealing with it and understand it. And I think we should just stay the course. That's just gives us time. We've got a lot to learn. We ourselves are still broken up into, we're compartmentalized as far as administration and what have you. From my earlier discussions, I'm like 50% of the streets department right now. I just don't have people to do a lot of the things that need to be done on a daily basis, let alone trying to prepare for events. So I would beg your consideration to just stay the course, July 1, 90 days, and stick within the confines of the locations that are not affected by street closures.
The other piece that we've talked through is the beautiful thing about Phoenixville is we don't do anything small. So when these events happen, they happen and they're done, and a lot of people come out. So we don't know what that's going to look like, now. I think that there'll still be some hesitancy, but we still have even just our open air permit, with everybody distance and everything along those lines, we have a good amount of people. So I think that it's also when we get an application in, not only do we take that in, but we also help the organizer kind of do the safest event with our services, but their own. So I think that 90 days is appropriate to work through all of those post-COVID, during COVID kind of conversations on how it's still going to be a safe event, in that perspective and those regulations.
So sorry, Mr. President.
Yes.
I wanted to add, I'm so sorry, I meant actually to add to, I know during my report, but I think too, it could be helpful to all of you in this process as you're making these decisions. But I do want to let you all know that Phoenixville is actually, has had extreme acceptance of the vaccine. And we have been working not only in Phoenixville, but we've been working with volunteers from Phoenixville have been working for weeks now with Chester County around vaccines. We actually launched an incredible partnership about 3 weeks ago between the Tower Health, the Gateway Pharmacy, our Office of Emergency Management, and the Valley Forge West End Fire Company. And we actually have mobile vaccine units that we have been dispersing to a variety of places throughout Phoenixville. We actually have just undergone an effort to vaccinate students at the high school with their parents' consent. So all of our students who are 15 and over at our high school have had the opportunity to be vaccinated if they wish to be so. And we are actually looking at dates for next week to begin a similar process for students who would be over 12 years old. So the Gateway Pharmacy has been absolutely incredible in getting vaccine for specifically our community. And we've had a lot of people take advantage of that. And I think we'll continue to see unique vaccine opportunities in Phoenixville, and we'll see a lot of people taking advantage of that. The Senior Center too has been hosting a vaccine clinic as well as the clinic every week for over a month or so. And we started to see a lot of people coming out to that. So one thing I would definitely encourage everyone, if you are able to, if you want to, please do get vaccinated, is our one way that we can definitely move forward.
The other point I wanted to make, I know in 2019 and then again in 2020, Policy and Council did make some changes to how our TCEs, our road closures, and our events actually are approved and what needs to be done. So maybe this is something that can also be discussed in our rec committee to discuss some of the events that might be less impacting. And maybe there's a way to accommodate some of the smaller events and to also discuss things like live music in the downtown and when that would be appropriate to encourage. I know the mayor himself has been vaccinating more people in Chester County than anybody else, I think. And I do appreciate all the efforts that his team has done. But the CDC today had us at a 36% rate. So that gives us a quite a high bar to still achieve before we're really reaching safe numbers. So I know, a lot of folks in their immediate circles, they're seeing a lot of people vaccinated, but there's quite a bit that aren't. Mr. Moore.
So 2 thoughts around that. One, we hold a public event. We draw people from in the borough, we draw people from Chester County, but we draw people from other places too. So you really would have to make a rough guesstimate based upon, let's call it Montco and Chester County, or is it Upper Chester County and Lower Montco, blah, blah, blah. So that's still the hard challenge was, as we did months ago, but we don't know what the future will bring, and we don't know what the trend lines will telling us, So I guess my principal question is public events, temporary community events, no additional road closures, that makes sense. But at this point, if somebody wanted to hold an event in late September in Reeves, suppose they wanted to hold instead of the dogwood, a fallwood. They wanted to try and organize the, a fall dogwood festival as a replacement. And they brought it to us, July 1. Is our current set of policies saying no, park-based at large group activities is still unacceptable. I don't know that we never ever really settled that as a policy issue. I know it was kind of discussed. I was mainly thinking about the Blues Festival in terms of timing. And we've got Halloween, we've got Firebird. What do we want to tell the second half of the July 1 is when we can start accepting 90-day out events. What do we want to start telling people? Because I think I heard from Dave from the public that people want to know, and we're a little bit. I think we're a little bit. We've still been playing let's wait and see, and I think we now have to kind of say we've waited and this is what we see, and then we have to make a decision about what we should be doing and telling people we will be supporting based upon what we now see. And I think that, I guess that's rec committee. I don't know whether that's policy, where that has to go. I think clearly has to go back to a committee, but.
Well, I think the guidelines that have come down, generally speaking, are allowing large gatherings of folks. When I say large gatherings, 500 or more, to a point. I don't remember what the point is, but certainly between now and our June meeting, we will finesse that information and get it back to you as to what is the message that we're sending. Our meeting's on June 8th, so almost a full month in advance of accepting applications. I think between now and June 8th, we would have hopefully more refined guidelines from the CDC, the governor's office, and sort of watching Philadelphia, which seems to be the most restrictive in their loosening up. What are they allowing to occur? As an example, I mentioned earlier that they already identified offices, no density restrictions. But that's pretty significant when you think about it. In close quarters, no restrictions on density. So then you pare that down to the outside events, and what does that mean? So I'm hopeful that between now and June 8th, those numbers will give us the ability to go to the public a month in advance of taking applications with general guidelines. In the park, you can have this many people. In this location, you can have this many people, et cetera, and sort of work our way through that. Obviously, we don't put any restrictions on the area between Star Street and Gay Street. We close it down, and it's whatever number it is. We've not put a restrictive number on that. So we're already in some way allowing a large gathering, and it polices itself. So our only purpose between now and June 8th would be to get you more of a purpose, because we're now allowing a very significant or a very specific event to occur. And so we want to put some rules on it, or maybe we don't. Certainly, I've got it already on my notes here to bring it up to Parks and Rec next week. Next week? Next week. Parks and Rec to have a dialogue, and if need be, send it over to policy in advance of the council meeting.
I will say with a couple other municipalities, they have limited it as of now to limited number events, so limited number attendee events. But to Jean's point, with our downtown closure, we don't limit the amount of numbers, but they have, if you're in a park and it's almost like a ticketed event, which can be done, but it's also difficult to do and is more on the organizer's perspective, to do that, and a cost. And then also, reading through the CDC guidelines, it can be confusing and contradictory in perspectives. But they also say about the length of an event, like Blues Fest, that's an all-day event, is a higher risk versus an event that's shorter in hours. So I think that there's a lot of factors that we could really dive into the detail of it when we go to Parks and Rec and policy with it.
Okay.
Yeah, all those pieces are really going to be important as we move forward. And I think to your point, Kelly, too, the responsible thing to do is if we still have the street closure, keeping it, so it's not invasive to everybody. It's fun and enjoyable and safe, but it's also respectful of the neighbors and all of that. And I do think too, even in June or July, looking at what are the small events, what small events can happen very easily and safely, and what other events may choose to wait until things are safer or may need to modify a little bit.
Just to inform the conversation as it moves forward, do we have an idea of what event groups would still be interested in having events this year? I would think that some would self-select out and say, for their own reasons that they might not be interested in pursuing an event. It'd be interesting to consider that in the conversation along with, kind of borough-sponsored things.
We put out feelers for that from the organizers that we've had, from the perspective of we're trying to be open with our communication on what council has decided and kind of what their thoughts are and how we can help from the borough and then a Phoenixville First to help promote those virtual events to help get the word out. The borough pre-COVID put on over 65 events a year throughout our downtown and in our parks, including 5Ks, runs, walks like that. I think in September, October, and probably the second week in November, we had an event every weekend or 3 events every weekend, depending on where you were in the borough. So we can get a number together for you. But first weekend in October, we had 3 events going on at one time. Second week in October, we would have 3 to 4 events, depending on what park you're in. And not including our own recreation programs as well. So I think that we have a lot that we can put some numbers to, just to say, here's how many before COVID happened, and we can reach out again and say, if we were to do this, would you be putting in an application? And just get some feedback. We can do that.
Sure, that would be great. Thank you.
I imagine that if at our June council meeting, we decided that the next day we could start accepting TCEs, that we might be able to still have events by Labor Day if that was the, if they fell into the confines of these smaller situations that did not require streets and police, additional streets and police than what we're already utilizing. There's, let's discuss that in committees and roadmap this out. But if nobody else has anything to add, do we think we've covered all the bases for this topic tonight? Okay, not seeing anybody else jump up. I think we've given staff enough to work with, and we'll have enough to discuss at committee next week. So with that, we'll move on to an entirely different topic. Under new business item B tonight, we have considered scheduling and advertising an ordinance authorizing the condemnation by eminent domain of real property for municipal purposes. I imagine this is one that either Gene or Chuck would want to lead off on with an explanation, or do we start with a motion?
Maybe we get a motion, Mr. President, and give you a little background.
Mr. President, I'll make a motion that council schedule and advertise a public hearing for an ordinance authorizing condemnation by eminent domain of real property for borough purposes.
We have a motion by Mr. Kirkner, seconded by Mr. Weiss. Questions on the motion? We will now, let's go into discussion here.
Yeah, Mr. President, I'll just give a little background and then I'll allow the manager to add if he'd like. This was a follow-up to our executive session that we held at the end of April. The borough code requires the borough to declare its intent to take property for public purpose by an ordinance with your authorization this evening, we would prepare that appropriate ordinance. Council recalls this is a piece of property that would allow for some road widening and intersection improvements in a portion of the borough that, according to staff, believe that this would be very helpful for traffic flow in congested areas. So that's the basis for the motion and why we're doing it. And unless there's more questions, I think council understands how we're proceeding and what we have to do on to move this forward. So there'll be an ordinance prepared for you to consider next month.
Thank you, Chuck. Gene, anything to add or?
No, I think we discussed it at length in executive session, and I think you know the background on this and what we've attempted to do over a rather long period of time. We haven't been able to get there, and so this is the power of the borough to move it forward in a way that we can start the project, assuming we can get to the end of the day on the ordinance. So tonight's motion, schedule and advertise the ordinance that's in your packet for the June 8th meeting.
Mr. President,
Go ahead, Mr. Weiss.
No, I defer.
okay, thank you. I was just going to ask, have we had any additional contact with the property owner?
Not since I sent the information as that I discussed with you, the documents and the offer information, and I've tried twice now in email communication, because that's the only medium I have to try and communicate other than mail. And I've left 2 emails, under the heading of, "Hey, just want to talk to you. Give me some information." My last communication, I believe, was in April. And at that point, we made a decision to bring it to you in executive session. And now you have the ordinance before you for consideration.
Gotcha. So still unresponsive on the other end.
Mr. Kirkner.
Okay.
Yes, Mr. President, if I may, the tax parcel is noted on the draft ordinance. I just want to add, for the edification of the public, that this is not property on the north side of Phoenixville. It's not north of French Creek. It would have to do with improvements to the intersection at Star and Bridge Streets.
All right. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 6-1. Okay. We'll see that next month. Moving on, under resolutions, we have a resolution. Well, can we have a motion to adopt, and then we can go into this?
I'll make a resolution to approve and authorize the execution of an intergovernmental agreement between the Borough of Phoenixville and the Phoenixville Area School District, enabling the Phoenixville Police Department to enforce school bus stop arm infractions.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Moore, second by Ms. Berkeley. I know the information on this resolution is in our packet as well. I know we are one of 3 municipalities that are part of this agreement because it's all the policing agencies for Phoenixville Area School District. The other 2 have already signed on to it, from my understanding. Any questions from council pertaining this procedure or this resolution? Mr. Moore.
My basic question was, I always assumed the police had the authority to enforce infractions against the school.
We do have Lieutenant Marshall on the line, so let me bring him on, and he can give us a quick rundown on, so probably answer all the questions in advance here.
Mr. Moore, you are correct. We've always had that in the vehicle code. However, this is now a civil fine. The person violating the civil law will get no points, and the school bus company will have a video installed on the arms. So we review it as a police department. If we feel there's an infraction, we hit yes. If we feel it's too close, they won't cite. and it's just a civil fine. They won't get points. It won't affect their driver's license or their insurance. A few other municipalities in the area, Montgomery County, have been doing it, and from what I understand, it's going to expand quite considerably in the near future.
Mr. Dalton.
Didn't the previous school bus infraction include points on the license?
It did under the vehicle code. You would get a suspended license for at least 15 days along with a hefty fine. This is a reduced fine. It was passed by Governor Wolf's office last year. The company doing this is going to invest a considerable amount of money, and every bus will have audio video on it. When the bus stops, the red lights flash, the video turns on. If there's an infraction, it gets sent to us. Whoever the officer is working that zone that day, he or she will review it. They feel a violation occurred. The company takes care of everything. They send them a civil fine. The borough gets a portion of it. The school district gets a portion of it for training and education. And then, of course, the private company retains the rest.
And the vehicle code still covers if you're there on site and witness this in person by the police department. Is that correct?
That's correct, sir. Yeah. So we still have that. We still have the option of going through the vehicle code and them having a hearing, but they still get the fine, but as opposed to vehicle code, they don't get the points. They won't get the license suspension.
Yeah, we should make it clear to council that this is an option based upon the new law change. So it is somewhat of a more simplistic way to cite drivers that violate the law. And as the lieutenant indicated, it's not quite a severe punishment, but it's still a civil fine that would hopefully deter that type of conduct from recurring.
That's correct. And prior to this law being changed last year, basically the bus driver would have to call the police department, give a description or a partial tag, and the bus driver would then have to come and testify. And some of our bus drivers are getting elderly, so if their vision's not good, they're like, well, I think it was him. But the big change in the law is we no longer have to prove who was driving the vehicle. We only have to prove the owner of the vehicle by the registration. So the big issue was with different magistrates was who was driving the car when the infraction occurred. And Governor Wolf changed the law. So now it says it's no longer the driver, it's the registered owner who gets the civil fine. So that's the big piece that we had issues before, is identifying who was driving the car, because it's difficult to see when the bus driver is letting children on and someone violates it, trying to get a good look at their face and like, it kind of looks like him, but I'm not sure. So that's where we're at with the new law, and that's why it was changed.
And I'm sorry, the resolution would allow council then to enter into the agreement with the school district so this can move forward.
Correct. And one other point of clarification, Mr. President, is it's also Schuylkill, East Pikeland, Phoenixville, and there's also some portions with the Pennsylvania State Police that also signed off, but they signed off across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, so they don't have to keep re-signing these. They signed for all of Pennsylvania as well.
Very good.
Mr. Weiss.
Two questions, if I may. One is how often is this revisited? Once we vote, if we were to vote this in, is this perpetual? Do we revisit this on a regular basis? How does that work?
Well, initially it was based upon the length of the duration of time between the company and the school district as far as putting the equipment in. But within this intergovernmental agreement, the borough has the right by giving written notice to pull out if you choose to do it. So it can be at your option, depending, in my view, how effective the police department thinks it's working.
So that was the first question. The second question is just what does the world look like if we do not vote this through? How can this be policed? What limitations do we have? Could you help articulate that?
Sure. It will be the same way that it is now. I think the lieutenant explained that. You can still use the vehicle code, which is a criminal offense. Burden of proof is higher. You would get points. So again, this is an option for a civil penalty, so to speak, which is why you don't have to identify the driver anymore. It's not a criminal offense. So again, this lessens the standard of proof, but makes it more easy to get the fines for the violator. So you could continue, if you didn't want to do this, you would still do what you're doing now, and that would require what the lieutenant indicated with witnesses and prosecution and issue citations and all that. So that still can happen.
And so is it still up to our discretion or our police officers' discretion if which path to pursue if we were to vote this in and a police officer had directly witnessed an infraction?
So if the officer witnesses an infraction, is actually there when the vehicle commits it, he or she does have the option of use either one. We have the option of citing through the vehicle code. However, a majority of them, and we probably get 1 or 2 a month, especially during the active season when the school kids are in play, going to school. It's the burden's on us. We know the tag, but it's difficult to say who was driving. We have the burden of proof to prove that person was driving the car. So for example, if I loaned my car to my neighbor and he committed this infraction, I wasn't driving, so I don't know who was, so it's very difficult to prove. This makes it much more easier. And the key is the whole reason this law was changed, there was a student that was killed by someone passing a bus illegally. They were cited, but again, it's all about the safety. It's not so much the potential for the civil fine, a small portion there, but it's to protect the kids and make awareness. And then the school district with their money is going to take that and do education in the community with it.
Okay. All right. Well, wonderful. So it sounds to me like this is just an expansion of our ability to protect kids from danger, and I see no downside. So thank you for answering my questions. I appreciate it.
And prior to this, we didn't have video, sir. We'd have to go on the school bus driver's recollection, what he or she saw, partial tag, identifying that, and then coming to court and testifying. Where now is the officer, he or she will review the video that's sent by the company that runs this through the school bus, and we make a determination. So if we say it's too close to call, then no civil fine is levied. If the officer who's in that zone says, yes, there was a violation, we do nothing. The company takes care of it. They send a civil fine. And from my understanding, in other states, they have a 95%, they just pay the fine. And 5% of the time they ask for a hearing, then we would be required to send the officer to testify in front of the district magistrate and show him the video, and then he'll determine guilt or innocence.
Thank you.
How much is the fine?
$100, I believe.
Any other questions on this resolution?
So Lieutenant Marshall, sorry, I hate to continue to be repetitive, but
That's fine.
basically this gives us the opportunity to still protect if an officer isn't there. It gives us more ability when it's harder to prove. So at least there's some kind of accountability in a situation when an officer did not observe the infraction and maybe we don't have video or something like that, or, something more substantial.
Correct. So currently for the last 25, 30 years, there was no video on the buses. They just had it there. Now, when the alarm goes out and the red lights are flashing, there's a video being recorded on both directions. So if someone does an infraction and passes illegally, that's reported and sent to us. And it's difficult for the officers don't follow the buses around. So, I mean, it happens occasionally, but it's very, very rare that we witnessed an infraction ourselves. It's usually the school bus driver calling, their dispatch, and they're calling the police, and we're going out to take a report.
Mr. Alton.
So without the possibility of, is there still a possibility of losing your license for passing a school bus? Because it seems counterproductive to child safety if a person knows that the worst that they're going to incur is passing a school bus is a fine and possibly hurting somebody. It seems like the selfishness of the driver might actually be more prone to pass and pay the fine instead of the possibility of losing their license or something worse. So is there still the possibility that if someone passes a school bus and they are caught, that there is potential for them to lose their license and not just pay a civil fine? If that was covered and I missed it, I apologize.
Short answer is yes. Still a potential they can use their license.
Okay,
I can tell you this.
Major deterrent to me, as well as child safety for that whole law, but okay.
The other issue too possibly is they can fight for their PennDOT suspension. So sometimes they're required not only to go to the magistrate, but they can appeal it to PennDOT. So, and there's an appellate process automatically at district court, which is, to your point, if someone's going to lose their license, their insurance going up, they're going to appeal that process. So from our perspective, from the police department, from risk mitigation, I'd rather have a video to show the judge, him or her, and say, here's empirical, unbiased evidence. Here's what happened. Same reason we have body cameras and we have in-car cameras in our vehicle, and let the judge, he or she, decide.
Okay.
So this makes someone accountable when we can't prove who's driving, in essence. Because we know that that car registered to said person passed the vehicle. We can even, so someone's accountable even when we can't prove who's driving, basically.
Correct. So the new law in Pennsylvania is, under this civil penalty, we just need the registered owner. It doesn't matter who's driving. So if I let my wife do it and I'm the registered owner, I'm getting the fine. Where under the vehicle code, for passing a school bus infraction, we have to prove who was driving beyond a reasonable doubt. And the judge has to say, yes, or there's not quite enough information. But based on my experience, the video far outweighs than a bus driver who's looking at the kids, gets a glimpse of a partial tag, may or may not have their glasses on, have to go and say with 100% that person was driving, where this case, this no longer applies in the civil arena. It's just who's the registered owner, and we have that through the registration, they get the fine. And it goes from there.
And if I remember correctly, there's an escalator. So if you're a repeat offender,
correct,
it's no longer a low cost of entry. The things start cranking up to the stick gets bigger.
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions from council? Okay, we'll call the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. All right. Thank you, Mr. Marshall. Moving along with our agenda tonight, we have two public hearings. I'll entertain a motion to open the first one.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to consider the ordinance amendment to Chapter 1, Administration and Government, Part 4, Bureaus, Boards, Commissions, and Agencies, the Boards of Appeals.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Weiss, second by Mr. Moore. Questions on the motion to open a public hearing? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. With that, I will turn this over to our solicitor, Chuck.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President. As was noted, this is a public hearing to consider changes to Chapter 1, Administration and Government of the Borough Code of Ordinances. Specifically, the change in this case would be to Section 1-441, addressing issues with the Board of Appeals. Procedurally, this ordinance and public hearing notice was advertised in the Mercury on May the 3rd. In addition, because the complete copy of the ordinance was not advertised, the ordinance was provided to the Chester County Law Library. And that notice was sent on April 26th. The ordinance is essentially a very minor change. There are two amendments or modifications to the existing section. The first section basically refers to the updated Property Maintenance Code edition. Currently, the ordinance refers to the Property Maintenance Code of 2009. Now we're using the 2021 edition. The second change to the ordinance in Section 1-441 adds jurisdiction of the Code Board of Appeals. So they have formal jurisdiction regarding decisions from the Phoenixville code official related to the Borough Housing Code. So it's kind of a dry ordinance change, but it is necessary to make sure that the board has the jurisdiction. At this point, if there were anyone in members of the public that wish to make comments to Borough Council regarding the ordinance amendment to this section and chapter, now would be the appropriate time. Ms. Logan will acknowledge you, and I would ask you provide your name and address and your comment to Borough Council. Jen, is there anyone that wants to comment on the proposed ordinance change?
Anyone wishing to comment could raise their hand and I'll be happy to disable your microphone so you can speak.
Give it a few moments just to be certain.
Mr. President, while we're waiting, in case anyone wants to comment, I would remind council that, as is typical, the ordinance has been advertised for consideration this evening. So at the close of the hearing, if council wants to adopt the ordinance, they can certainly do so.
Thank you, Mr. Garner. At this time, Mr. Ewald, there are no hands raised from the public.
Very good. Thank you. With that, that concludes this public hearing, I believe. We have a motion to close.
I make the motion to close the public hearing, Mr. President.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Kirkner, seconded by Mr. Weiss. Any questions on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. The public hearing is now closed. We can move on to our second public hearing with a motion to open that second public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Berkeley, seconded by Mr. Weiss. Questions on the motion to open this second public hearing? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Chuck, we'll go back to you for this public hearing.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. President. The second hearing in front of council this evening concerns an amendment to Chapter 5, Code Enforcement of the Code of Ordinances of the Borough of Phoenixville. Procedurally, hearing notice as well as the intent to adopt this ordinance was advertised in the Mercury on May the 3rd of this year. In addition, notice of the ordinance itself was provided to the Chester County Law Library on April 26th of this year as well. What you're doing with this ordinance change is rather straightforward. There are two sections under Chapter 5 Code Enforcement, sections 5-401 and 5-402. Both relate to a requirement for installation of electrical transformers. Both of those sections are being repealed. The reason they're being repealed is that this regulation has been preempted and is provided for in the state Uniform Construction Code. So the ordinance change would basically repeal the provisions that have existed in your ordinance since, I believe, 1970. So certainly a change is in order. If there's anyone in the audience that wishes to address council regarding the change to this ordinance, now would be the time. Again, I would ask Ms. Logan, acknowledge your name and address and provide your comment to council with respect to the ordinance amendment. Jen?
If you wish to address council regarding this ordinance change, please raise your hand and I will disable your microphone so you can speak to council.
It does appear that we got a good 105 years out of the one ordinance. So I think we did pretty good on that one. 1915 is pretty solid.
Mr. Garner, Mr. Ewald, I have no hands raised for public participation.
Thank you, Ms. Logan. With that, we'll entertain a motion to close this round of public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Weiss, second by Ms. Berkeley. Questions on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. With that, we do have two items that we just held public hearings for that are available for adoption. What is council's pleasure for these two ordinance amendments and ordinance of repeal?
Mr. President.
Mr. President, go ahead, Rich.
Okay, I make a motion that we adopt the ordinance to amend Chapter 1 of Administration and Government, creating a Board of Appeals.
Second.
A motion by Mr. Kirkner, second by Mr. Moore. Questions on the motion?
Mr. President, I do have one.
Let's start with Mr. Kirkner.
Yes, on the draft ordinance, item D, I believe there is a typo there at the end of the second line, item D, it says which are files pursuant to the code. I believe that should be the past tense of the verb to file, not the plural of the noun file. So it should be which are filed pursuant to the code, I believe.
You're correct, Mr. Kirkner. It's a typo.
Looks like the other three sections got it
I
right.
was gonna, that's no fair. I was gonna say that.
that.
A couple of professional writers proofreading there.
Since that's not a substantive change, I don't believe any actions required to fix that.
You'd be correct, Mr. President.
Okay, any other questions on the motion to adopt? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0.
Rich,
and
would
what
you
is
have
com-
argued for inalienable instead of unalienable in the declaration? What would your pleasure have been?
I wouldn't
stay on
argue
the-
with those guys.
Yeah. What is council's pleasure for the second ordinance repeal tonight?
Mr. President, I'll make the motion that we adopt the ordinance amending Chapter 5 of Code Enforcement by repealing the Part 4 for electrical transformers.
I'll second.
Motion by Mr. Kirkner, seconded by Mr. Weiss. Questions on this motion to repeal this ordinance? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Thank you, and thank you to our solicitor for helping us out through that. We'll now go into our reports of committees, boards, and commissions. Mr. Moore, you are up first with Planning Commission.
So there has been no planning commission since the last meeting, since the last time Borough Council met. There will be a planning commission meeting 6 p.m. Thursday of this week, May 13th, 6 p.m. On Zoom. All are invited.
Thank you. Next up, we have Historic Architectural Review Board with Mr. Weiss.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. One item coming out of HARB this month. I'd like to make a motion to consider the approval of the certificate of appropriateness for a sign installation request for 18B Gay Street as recommended in HARB 7-0 per the action memo of May 4th, 2021.
Second,
Motion by Mr. Weiss, second by Ms. Berkeley. Questions on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Anything else, Mr. Weiss?
Nope, that'll be it. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you. Mr. Kirkner with Regional Planning Committee.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. Not much going on there. There is talk of establishing a regional planning trail planning committee. That's a couple of plannings in one title there. With municipal representatives from each of the participating municipalities, as well as other groups. I spoke with you about that earlier, and certainly defer to you on how to proceed with designating a municipal representative for Phoenixville for that. Otherwise, there's not much going on. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich. With that, Ms. Dugan with Rec Board.
Okay, we've got actually a new thing this time. There is a new summer camp that we're doing with the Ultimate Frisbee. And that's going to be at Reservoir Park. There's a choice between a full day and a half day. And that starts in June, late June. And then other things that we've done before, we've got the summer soccer shots started with with dates added for the summer, a 7-week program for the children at Morse Street Park, and registration is still available for a couple other of the week-long summer camps that we've done before, like the art, science, Lego, sports camp. And if you check the website, it'll let you know what you need to do for each of those things. So that's where we are right now.
Great. Thank you, Dana. Is anybody able to report out for BAC? Mr. Crack, I believe you, or if there's anything to report, otherwise we can.
I mean, they're sort of getting their the group together. They've had some new people come on board, and so I think they're really just kind of pulling together, trying to figure out the next steps. They've got a lot of agenda items that they want to start moving forward on, but generally speaking, they're concerned about how parks look, and they're concerned about the trails and how things are looking, and so. I think you're going to see some changes come out of there in a good way over the next couple of months. So we'll give them a little bit more time and see where they go.
Great. And if I saw correctly, I think utility box painting applications are open now for any local artists that are looking to beautify any of our various utility boxes around town. That was the one item of note I noticed. But with that, thank you, Mr. Crack. With that, move on to Tree Advisory Commission with Ms. Berkeley.
I was not in attendance yesterday. Mr. Weiss did cover that for me, but I am happy to reiterate that I was able to be part of the tree planting for Arbor Day that the mayor mentioned earlier, and that our new arborist was able to attend the meeting yesterday. So Mr. Weiss, please chime in if I'm missing anything. So we are really looking forward to that collaboration and moving forward with all the agenda items that we kind of set forth as our tick list in January when I first started joining the meeting.
Yeah. The only thing I would add is our arborist hit the ground running, has a lot to offer right off the bat. So we see I would see a lot of good things coming from that. So we're off to a great start with that relationship.
I think Mr. Crack mentioned that we're responsible for 2,500 trees. He's responsible for $500,000, $250,000.
It's six figures.
Yeah, a big number. So he certainly seems prepared and qualified, and that's great to hear. Thank you. We'll move right into police personnel and public safety with Ms. Berkeley.
No action to report coming out of committee, but as you plugged earlier, we do have some vacancies on committees and commissions. So I would encourage anyone to look at those, reach out to your local council person, reach out to myself as the chair or another member of the committee, and apply, as well as join us during those meetings to have a nice dialogue about the positions.
Thank you. And Ms. Dugan or Mr. Moore, would you like to report out on Parks and Rec Committee?
There really wasn't much to the
Okay.
the council for that. So this is actually a good week for Mr. Soto not to be able to attend.
That's an easy one. And with that, we'll move to Mr. Dalton with policy.
Thank you, Mr. President. Nice 4 motions, hopefully tonight. My first motion I'd like to make a motion to consider scheduling and advertising a public hearing to consider an ordinance repealing Chapter 11, which is housing, and enacting an updated Chapter 11 housing and real property ordinance, as recommended in committee 3-0.
Second.
A motion by Mr. Dalton, seconded by Mr. Weiss. Questions on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Mr. Dalton.
Thank you, Mr. President. And for my second motion, I'd like to make a motion to consider scheduling and advertising a public hearing to consider an ordinance amendment to Chapter 5, which is code enforcement, Part 2, which is the property maintenance code, as recommended in committee 3-0.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Dalton, seconded by Mr. Moore. Any questions on this motion to schedule and advertise? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Mr. Dalton.
And for my third motion, I'd like to make a motion to consider scheduling and advertising a public hearing to consider an ordinance amendment to Chapter 15, motor vehicles and traffic, as recommended in committee 3-0.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Dalton, seconded by Mr. Weiss. Questions on this motion? Mr. Crack.
I just want to give an update. In policy, we had talked about several stop sign locations, specifically as they relate to State Route 113 on Dayton and Franklin. I did communicate with PennDOT, and they have started the review process. It is a requirement. So I think I mentioned to you that if we were able to get to do it ourselves, it would be included in this ordinance. And PennDOT has indicated they'll start to study. So we'll defer this to the next version of the motor vehicle ordinance. So I just want to update the committee that we did look at it. We are required to do it, and so it won't be in this ordinance that you're putting forward tonight. It'll be in the next version of it.
Very good. Any other questions on the motion or the new news on it? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. And Mr. Dalton.
And for my final motion, I'd like to make a motion to consider scheduling and advertising a public hearing to consider an ordinance amendment to vacate an unnamed alley between Evergreen and Christmas Street as recommended in committee 3-0.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Dalton, seconded by Mr. Moore. Questions on this motion? This is a paper road at the moment. So was this even mapped, or is it
It really wasn't mapped. It's just there, but it's not even. That's why it's called an unnamed alley, because it's not even tied to anything that was previously there. So we went back to, I think, 1904 to see if something was there. The Sanborn maps didn't. They had it shown, but there was no connection to anything.
Got it. Okay. Any other questions on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Anything else, Mr. Dalton?
Nothing further from policy. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Mr. Weiss with Infrastructure, Technology, and Transportation Committee.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Lots of projects in motion, moving incrementally forward. Nothing to report to council at this time. I would just like to point out that the next ITT meeting is next Tuesday, May 18th at 7 p.m. Open to the public and welcome anybody to join. And that's all from ITT. Thank you.
Thank you. And moving on to Finance Committee, Ms. Dugan.
Okay, I'm going to bundle 1 through 4. So I will make a motion to approve the 2021 prepaids dated 3/13/2021 to 4/9/2021 in the amount of $1,130,199.51, to approve the 2021 prepaid credit card statement dated 3/13/2021 to 4/9/2021 in the amount of $53,547.65, to approve the 2021 prepaids ACH dated 3/31/2021 in the amount of $33,337.70. And this is an easy one. And also to approve the budget increase 2021-005 in the amount of $8,237 from sanitation fund balance to solid waste vehicle replacement due to an increase in cost of steel.
Second, Mr. President.
Motion by Ms. Dugan, seconded by Mr. Kirkner. Questions on this bundle of motions? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. And Ms. Dugan.
And finally, I'll make a motion to approve the budget increase 2021-008 in the amount of $50,000 from wastewater fund balance to wastewater sewer treatment, SOMEX permitting, Manco Gold DEP permitting proposal.
Motion by Ms. Dugan, seconded by Mr. Moore. Questions on this motion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Ms. Dugan.
That's all. I probably should have bundled them all. I thought the last one might be a question, but okay.
There we go. All right. With that wraps up our agenda items from referred out of council committees. We'll move on to open our second and final round of public participation. If you joined us earlier tonight, we mentioned if you want to make any public comment, please raise your hand virtually. A member of our staff will allow you to unmic or mic up and make your comment. So any members of the public that would like to make any comment, please raise your hand virtually and a member of our staff will call on you.
Mr. Lutzker, I'm going to unmicrophone your microphone. Turn on your microphone.
Thank you. So I'd like to mention, and this is in the name of the Green Team, specifically the Green Earth Festival. So in the best case scenario, the vaccination rate is very high, restrictions are lifted across the Commonwealth, and everyone has fun. In the worst case, and I'm not going to mention the virus because I'm an optimist, and in this case, my optimism is actually backed up by evidence. So vaccination rate would be high, restrictions are lifted, September is gorgeous, and there are no events. That would be a really bad case in my mind. But there's a middle ground, is that if we would allow applications for events starting June 1st or June 9th, as President Ewald mentioned, then in August, there's a spike and the guidelines and safety protocols say that planned events need to be canceled. That would be a bummer, but everyone would understand that. So I understand the need for a 90-day notice, and that's why I'm hoping that we can accept applications early in June so that we can have the possibility of having events in September. It would be a shame to reach the point where we could and we don't. The Green Earth Festival, I mean, the big festivals are already canceled. And I understand the need for keeping things small and within the restrictions, but frankly, on behalf of the Green Team, we'd like to have a festival, and we'll do it within whatever restrictions need to be applied, and whatever those are. We've picked a date, September 18th, and we'll work with the council to make that happen for the public. Now I'd like to actually digress to a different topic. And I hope I don't overstay my, 3 minutes, 5 minutes that I'm allowed, but if you'll allow me, I'll start with a personal story. I have a dear old good friend who drives an EV, comes down from New York to visit me, and he has some time left. I said, oh, great, you need to charge? Fantastic. Come to Phoenixville, 16 chargers. He comes, we're ready to spend some time together, but we actually spend 10 minutes looking for a parking spot that's available. The chargers happen to be in prime parking locations. And he mentioned, and I don't know from EVs, but he says usually they're put in the farthest away spaces so that the last ones, if they're not reserved specifically for EVs, they're in the out of the way spaces so that people that need them can use them if there's any space left available. So I don't know that we're done in the borough with EV chargers for a couple of reasons. My personal story notwithstanding, I'd love to hear about existing plans for the Civic Center, for the new municipal lot that's going to be with the new development, about additional EV charging stations, perhaps reserved for EVs. But maybe this isn't news. There is, of course, in general, but specifically new federal money coming via the Community Electric Vehicle Charging Grant Program. The name of the program, it refers to chargers, but actually includes money for vehicles, including trucks, garbage trucks, police, and other municipal vehicles. At this stage, this grant program is in the conceptual phase, and it is mostly going through Clean Cities coalitions at a high level, but it is moving pretty fast, and I'm told that money will be in hand by September of this year. So right now, this is just a heads up to say Phoenixville, we are not done with EV chargers. I hope we continue to take the lead and that we're ready to begin with electric vehicles for the borough in the near future. That's all I have. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Lutzker. Have a good evening. At this
Any other
time,
public
Mr.
comments today?
Ewald, there's only one other public and he does not have his hand raised.
Great. With that, we'll close this round of public participation. Mr. Manager, anything to report on your end?
Sure, there's a couple things that I just want to mention. In your packet, you probably saw the letter from Denise Wallace to Pennsylvania American, and consistent with the agreement that we had with the sale of the outside water assets. When they got their approval by the PUC to up their rates, we too get to up our rates with them. And so that letter put them on notice, and the first billing went out with the new rates. So there's going to be an increase in our bottom line because of that rate increase, which is a good thing. So keeping McNeese Wallace on board, which you allowed last year, sort of kind of like on retainer, really worked out well. We were able to get this right out of the box. The PUC approved it in the March timeframe, but it was retroactive to January. So we retroactive went back to January as well. And then the other thing I want to definitely acknowledge Upper Providence Township. As you know, we did the Montclair Bridge Connector with almost 100% funding, but we had to dip into our own pockets, to our own budget to get the last $100,000, or about $114,000. We sent letters to Montgomery County, Chester County, and to Upper Providence. And in your packet is a letter from Upper Providence saying that they were fully on board, supported it, and sent us a check for that for $28,000. So that's a really good thing. They are asking us whether we want to participate in a sort of a regional discussion. Mr. Ewald and I are communicating back and forth with them. We're targeting a June date. Mr. Ewald, I'm sure, will reach out and see who else might be interested in participating in that. It's a date in early June, and it's a morning event. And then lastly, just to, so that there's an awareness of why. We understood that those locations with the electric vehicle charging stations were prime locations, but it's also the same prime location where the power was at. So we didn't really have a choice except for running an extensive amount of electric underground, which would have been prohibitive financially. So we put them as close as we could to the power. It was a very specific power that was required, given the number of stations. So we did take that into consideration. We're not installing any, but both the recreation center, the new recreation center, and the fire station have conduit to the parking lots for electric vehicle charging stations when we're available to do that. And we certainly have been looking at trash trucks and other things. There's lots of reasons why, when you buy them one at a time, the exponentially cost is not as beneficial to us as it might be to a waste management or to other such companies. But we are continually looking at those types of green things. And I might mention just, and I'll bring it up and make it an agenda item for the Parks and Rec. The Green Earth Festival is relatively innocuous to a traditional temporary community event. And it's more closely tied to the farmers market, which is already in an approved process. So I think our recommendation is going to come to Parks and Recreation, that it can piggyback without the necessity of changing anything else we talked about tonight. But we'll talk more about it at the Parks and Rec meeting, and I encourage Mr. Lutzker to attend that meeting and weigh in and see how that discussion goes. But we are trying to work within the mediums that we already have.
Thank
That's
you,
it
Gene.
for
And
me.
I do want to echo, and I do appreciate Upper Providence Township. It was we did go send the letter after the fact, and I do appreciate having a neighbor municipality that is as keen on trails as they are, as it appears as we are. So having that partnership is helpful. If any members of council would be interested in taking part in that, just reach out to me. We can see if the dates and times work. I imagine it's going to be the first of several conversations, though. So with that, all the other department updates are in the packet. If council has any questions on any of the staff reports. Otherwise, I believe that is it for our agenda tonight. We don't have any need for any executive session. So I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Weiss, second by Mr. Moore. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. Have a
Thanks,
great night.
everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.